as part of a collaboration with my friend Dave from Dr. Toys here on YouTube, as well as several other makers, I was asked to participate in the 1M Robots Art Challenge. That is going to be featured at DesignerCon this November in Las Vegas. So the challenge, my friends, is to take this adorable bot and put it square in the middle of the Star Wars universe. And that's what we're going to do. So, with our little project bot here, I want to do something that caters to what we build around here. And the first thing I thought of was maybe we can put this guy in some kind of droid factory. This is the remains of my Star Wars droid factory. I believe this was released around 1977. The idea was you could take all these parts and pieces and build yourself a little droid. It made me think that this might be an interesting way to display our robot friend here. We could put him in some kind of assembly station and maybe have a bunch of Jawas working on him. Here's the funny bit of fact for you. This droid factory is remarkably close in appearance to this Jabba's dungeon, I believe is what they call it. And this is also similar to this that I'm showing you here. I find it comical that these droid factories or dungeons, they are essentially the same build. In this particular model, all the recesses were designed to fit all the various tools and droid parts. Take the Jabba's dungeon version here. You can see they filled in all those areas. This particular Jabba's dungeon piece, I'm actually going to use it for this project. And we are going to be heavily modifying it. I can do that because this I purchased on eBay for around 12 bucks. It didn't have anything. It didn't even have the crane here. When I got it, it was absolutely filthy and disgusting, so it took a lot of washing. We want to take a look at our bot, and what I like is the way it's been designed. There's plenty of space on the inside. If you wanted to add electronics, you could do that fairly easily. I like the idea of building this so that there's some visible guts to this bot. The armature and feet are all removable, and we're going to add some various details to these. When the bot was presented to me, the idea was to alter it and make it my own for this project. So we're going to do some adjustments. So we are going to add some different pieces to make it feel a little bit more Star Wars-ish. One of the things I'm entertaining is if we put the lower half and a leg was mounted in place like so, there's a little recess right here, and I think that might be an interesting place for one of the legs to be held. So you get this look of the lower half is under construction. What I would like to do is have the crane here attached to the upper part of the droid, as if it's swinging in this direction, being brought over to the base. So the first thing I want to do is I want to detail out this inside, and I have various little bits of model kit parts that I've kind of cut into pieces, and we'll just kind of glue them in place here. This was a reader for a hard drive. There's a little laser reader on here. It's painted gray because I used it in my old room build, but it's got a neat design to it. We can place it inside here like so, and we'll glue it in place, and now we have depth. And then we can add some wires, and that'll give at least the base of the body some kind of mechanical look to it. For this little skull here, as cool as that is, I'm going to cover that with a little detail here. This is just a wheel from a tank. We'll let that dry. So now we've got one on either side, and then I threw just a little piece on the back here to cover up that number. The other thing I want to do is put some antennas on this guy. Now we got all these pieces with various details on them. The top with some of the bits and pieces, and then the legs as well. Now we're going to give this all a zenithal highlight. Here we are with a little zenithal highlight on it. I didn't feel the need to add too much detail because, well, this thing has a lot of detail as it is. And I'm sure all the vintage toy collectors are screaming with their fingers on the keyboard right now as I have ruined this, and I'm okay with that. I would like to have some details back here. So I put together a quick greebly design here. We'll be able to put those in place on the back panel and they'll fit right in that little slot. I'm gonna paint these up real quick and then we'll glue them in place. One thing I want specifically is a cluster of little Jawas. Gotta glue a few of these together and then we can get some primer on them. Okay, it's time to paint up our little friend here. I'm gonna start out with a little bit of this hardened leather, which is a speed paint. The speed paint is similar to contrast paint. What happens is it sort of pools in such a way that you get some natural contrast between high and low points of whatever it is you're painting. All right, here's the first pass. Not terrible. We've got some mistakes here and there. We'll clean that up. But next we're gonna add this Citadel contrast paint. I'm just putting this in some of these sections where there'd be heavy shadow. This particular brown contrast paint will help accentuate some of those deep folds in the fabric and the shadowed areas. This snakebite leathering, it's another contrast paint. What I want to do is I want to address all the little pouches. I don't want them to be just the same brown color we've already used. I found that I have to work this with a couple of different brushes. One with the paint heavily saturated on there, and then another brush that I go in with, and then I can pull off some of the paint that's pooled. And so you get kind of a light finish, giving you a three-dimensional look with some shading and highlights. And now we need to address our little hands. And the last thing I want to do here is I want to add some edge highlighting to accentuate certain aspects. So for example, if the light were to hit in this area and provide a little edge highlighting on the hood here. And now that we got all the highlights on there, even a couple of dots for the eyes, we've got this little guy and several other friends of his all done up, and these guys all look like they're ready. So I took the base here and I hit it with a cream color. I like the idea of the cream because we can dirty this up. And in order to do that, I've taken some mineral spirits and some of the water mixable oil paints, and I've made a thin wash with this. And the idea here is to go in and add this wash to accent some of the details. Whenever I start weathering a project, I always start off very gingerly. I go slow and I get a feel for how I want everything to get weathered before I go too crazy. So I always feel really timid when I'm first starting out with it, like I'm just barely doing things, and then by the time I get into it, things usually get pretty dirty. And this little project here really should be pretty dirty, considering it's going to probably have a lot of stains, like a mechanic shop, if you will. We have a decent weathering here. This is a good start. We'll do some more to it here as we go along and add parts and pieces. I hit this with a little silver because I want to do masking fluid on this thing here before I airbrush it. All right, there we go. We got some yellow applied. I used a couple of mixtures of yellow. It looks a little bright on camera, but it's got kind of a nice dull color. Then we'll peel it off, we'll get it some nice weathering, and we'll be good to go. So I'm using a little wire as kind of a chain, I guess. Some kind of wire cable. You'll see why in a second here. That'll work just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to hang the top of the droid from the end of this crane. So we got our little guy hanging. I'm going to weather up this right in the middle here. Just add a little bit of grime to him. I'm going to glue this little guy in place in this back corner. I'm actually using epoxy because I really want to make sure that these do not come loose. Super glue is just not enough. I can have a little cable coming out from him, holding the droid's body as if he's kind of guiding him into place. This wire is not quite as loose, so we're going to have to kind of shape it. One thing I want to add for sure is some kind of pigment, some kind of weathering powder. The idea is to just add it sparingly, but enough that you get a little idea of the dust and dirt that would accumulate. So I'll be adding a little bit of all of these in here to try to give it a little bit of balance, a little bit of dust, just to try to make this thing look a little more interesting. Big thank you to my friend Dave from Dr. Toys for reaching out to us and asking us to be part of this collaboration. I put a link in the description to a playlist he has on his channel for several more artists that collaborated on this project. As for me, well, it's back to work on the next one. Back to building something out of nothing.